In the twilight hours when the veil between worlds grows thin, ancient powers stirred once more. The year was 2157, and Earth hung by a thread so delicate that even the whisper of wind through dying forests threatened to snap it entirely. Climate change had ravaged the planet for decades, but what humanity didn't know was that their world's destruction had awakened something far older and more dangerous than rising seas or scorching temperatures. Deep beneath the Carpathian Mountains, in caverns that predated human civilization by millennia, the great dragon Pyraxis opened eyes like molten gold for the first time in 500 years. His massive form, scales black as obsidian with veins of crimson running through them like lava flows, stretched nearly 200 feet from snout to tail. The ancient worm had felt it in his bones, the way the Earth's life force was being systematically drained away by an entity that should have remained sealed for eternity. Meanwhile, in the hidden realm of Ethermore that existed parallel to Earth's dimension, the Elven Council convened in emergency session. Their realm, sustained by the magical energies that flowed through all living worlds, was beginning to fade as Earth's life force weakened. Silviana Starweaver, the youngest member ever elected to the High Council at barely 3 centuries old, stood before her elders with urgent news that would change everything. "The Void Harvester has awakened," she announced, her voice carrying clearly through the crystal amphitheater where moonbeams danced across walls of living silver. Her long platinum hair seemed to shimmer with its own inner light, and her violet eyes held depths of knowledge that belied her relatively young age. The ancient enemy that our ancestors helped imprison beneath the Earth's core has begun feeding again. Every forest fire, every extinct species, every poisoned river strengthens it. Elder Thalarin, his face bearing the wisdom of 2 millennia, leaned forward on his staff of woven starlight. "Are you certain, young Starweaver?" "The seals were meant to hold for 10,000 years. Silviana nodded gravely. "The humans' destruction of their world has created cracks in the dimensional barriers. The Void Harvester doesn't need to break free entirely anymore. It can feed through these fractures, growing stronger with each life it devours. Soon it will have enough power to shatter its prison completely, and when that happens..." She didn't need to finish. Every elf in the chamber knew the stories passed down through generations. The Void Harvester was an entity of pure entropy, a cosmic parasite that moved from world to world, draining them of all life and magic before moving on to the next. Earth was not its first victim, and unless something was done, it would not be the last. "There is hope," Silviana continued. "The ancient prophecies speak of an alliance between the children of magic and the children of flame. Dragons and elves united as they were in the old wars. But time grows short. Our realm weakens daily as Earth dies, and soon we will lack the power to intervene." As if summoned by her words, the chamber's crystal walls suddenly resonated with a deep, harmonic vibration that seemed to come from the very bones of the Earth. Through the dimensional barriers came a voice like distant thunder, speaking in the old tongue that both dragons and elves remembered from the world's youth. "Children of the Between Realms," Pyraxis spoke, his mental voice reaching across the void between dimensions. "I am Pyraxis the Eternal, guardian of the deep fires, and I have awakened to find our world dying. The great enemy stirs once more. We must renew the ancient compact if any of our peoples are to survive." The Elven Council exchanged glances filled with centuries of accumulated wisdom and worry. It had been nearly 1,000 years since dragons and elves had worked together. The last great alliance had ended in bitter disagreement over how to handle humanity's growing influence on the world. Now faced with extinction, old grudges seemed petty indeed. Silviana stepped forward, her hand moving instinctively to the crystal pendant at her throat, a fragment of pure starlight that had been passed down through her family line for 40 generations. "Great Pyraxis, I am Silviana Starweaver of the High Council. We accept your call to alliance. But how do we fight an enemy that feeds on the very destruction humanity has wrought? The Void Harvester grows stronger with every passing day." The dragon's laughter was like the rumble of distant earthquakes. "Young Starweaver, you think too much like your kind, seeking elegant magical solutions to brute problems. The humans may have weakened the barriers, but they have also created something else, something the Void Harvester did not expect. They have created hope in the face of despair, innovation born from desperation. We must work with them, not around them." Elder Thalorin's expression grew troubled. "Dragons were always too fond of the younger races. Humans cannot be trusted with knowledge of our existence. They would either worship us as gods or seek to destroy us as demons." "Perhaps," Pyraxis rumbled with ancient amusement. "But tell me, wise elder, How has isolation served our peoples? Your realm fades while mine trembles with the harvester's hunger. Pride is a luxury we can no longer afford. As the debate continued across dimensional boundaries, neither dragons nor elves noticed the subtle shift in the magical currents around them. Far below, in the molten depths where the void harvester had been imprisoned since the world was young, something stirred with malevolent intelligence. The entity had indeed been listening, learning from their conversation, and it was pleased. The void harvester had consumed countless worlds over cosmic ages, but never had it encountered a species so perfectly suited to its needs as humans. Their capacity for destruction was matched only by their ability to multiply that destruction through technology and ideology. Every war, every environmental catastrophe, every act of greed or hatred opened new feeding channels for the ancient entity. But dragons and elves working together again? That was troublesome. The last time they had united, it had taken the combined sacrifice of both species' greatest heroes to imprison the harvester. If they managed such cooperation again, they might actually pose a threat to its feeding schedule. The entity began to move more actively, sending tendrils of influence through the cracks in reality it had been exploiting. Across Earth's surface, natural disasters began to intensify. The great hurricane that had been brewing in the Atlantic suddenly doubled in size and strength. Volcanic activity increased along the Ring of Fire. The melting permafrost in Siberia accelerated, releasing not just greenhouse gases but something far worse, ancient viral entities that had been frozen since the last ice age. Silviana felt the surge in malevolent energy like a physical blow. Through her connection to the world's magical network, she could sense the harvester's renewed activity. "It knows," she gasped, steadying herself against her chair of woven silver and crystal. "The entity knows we're planning to unite against it. It's accelerating its feeding schedule." Pyraxis' response was swift and decisive. "Then we move immediately. Young Starweaver, can your people open a stable portal to my realm? The old ways of crossing between worlds are too slow for what we must accomplish." The Elven Council erupted in concerned murmurs. Opening a portal between dimensions required enormous amounts of magical energy they could ill afford to spend while their realm was already weakening. But Silviana stood tall, her hand gripping her starlight pendant until it blazed with silver fire. "I can do it," she declared, though the cost would likely drain her for months to come. "But not here, and not alone. I'll need to work with the dragon's power to stabilize the crossing. The risk is enormous. If the portal collapses while someone is crossing, death would be the least of our concerns," Elder Thaloran finished grimly. "Dimensional collapse could destroy both realms entirely." Pyraxis' voice carried a note of grim humor. "Then we'd better not collapse it, hadn't we? Starweaver, I'll meet you at the convergence point where the barriers are thinnest. The old oak grove in what humans now call Sherwood Forest. The trees there are ancient enough to remember when magic flowed freely in their world." Silviana nodded, already beginning the complex mental preparations necessary for such a massive working of magic. Around her, the other council members began to glow with shared power, ready to lend their strength to her efforts. The crystal amphitheater itself began to resonate, channeling the accumulated magic of their entire realm toward the coming attempt. "Wait," Elder Thaloran said suddenly. "If we're truly committed to this path, to working with humans, then we should not do this in secret. There is one among their kind who might be worthy of trust. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the climatologist who has been studying the unusual energy readings around sites of environmental collapse. Her work has brought her close to discovering our existence anyway." Silviana paused in her preparations. "You would reveal our presence to a human? The Council has voted against such contact for centuries." "Desperate times call for desperate measures," the elder replied. "And if we're asking dragons to set aside their pride, perhaps it's time we examined our own prejudices. Besides, we'll need someone who understands both the scientific and mystical aspects of what we're facing. The Void Harvester feeds on death and despair, but it also corrupts the natural order in ways that their instruments might detect. Dr. Elena Vasquez was, at that very moment, standing in the ruins of what had once been the Amazon rainforest, staring at readings that defied every scientific principle she understood. Her portable spectrometer was detecting energy signatures that shouldn't exist, wavelengths of radiation that seemed to bend reality around them. The dead trees around her weren't just burned or diseased. They appeared to have been drained of something essential, leaving behind husks that crumbled to dust at the slightest touch. "This is impossible," she murmured into her voice recorder, a habit developed over 20 years of field work. "The energy reading suggests some form of directed extraction, as if something is literally feeding on the life force of the forest." But that violates basic thermodynamics unless... She paused, her scientific mind wrestling with possibilities that her training told her were fantasy. Unless there's an intelligence behind it, she continued slowly, something that can manipulate energy in ways we don't understand. The pattern is too organized, too efficient to be natural. But what could do this? And why now? As if in answer to her question, the air around her began to shimmer with opalescent light. Elena stepped back, her hand moving instinctively to the emergency beacon that could summon her research team, but she found herself unable to move, caught in a web of gentle but irresistible force. Vasquez, a voice spoke directly into her mind, melodious and ancient. Please do not be afraid. My name is Silviana Starweaver, and I represent a people who have watched over this world since before your species learned to speak. We have need of your knowledge and your courage. Elena's scientific skepticism warred with the evidence of her own senses, as the air before her began to solidify into the shape of a tall, ethereally beautiful woman with pointed ears and eyes like captured starlight. Every rational part of her mind screamed that this was impossible, but the readings on her instruments were going haywire in ways that suggested massive energy manipulation. You're an elf, Elena said finally, her voice steady despite the impossibility of the situation. Actual elves exist. As do dragons, Silviana replied with a slight smile. And, unfortunately, so do things far more dangerous than either of us. Doctor? Vasquez, your world is dying, but not in the way your people believe. Yes, climate change and environmental destruction are real and dangerous, but they are also symptoms of something far worse. An ancient entity has awakened beneath your world's surface, and it is feeding on the death and despair that humanity has created. Every extinction, every disaster, every act of environmental destruction makes it stronger. Elena's mind raced as pieces began to fall into place. The energy readings I've been tracking. The pattern of environmental collapse. It's not random, is it? Something is directing it, accelerating it, precisely. And now that entity knows we are aware of it, it will move more quickly to complete its feeding. When it has consumed enough life force, it will break free from its ancient prison and devour not just your world, but the magical realms connected to it as well. Millions of worlds across multiple dimensions are at risk. The scientist in Elena wanted to demand proof, evidence, peer review, but the readings on her instruments, the dead forest around her, and the impossible woman standing before her painted a picture too consistent to dismiss. What do you need from me? Your knowledge of human technology and your understanding of the scientific principles behind what we're facing. We are planning something that has not been attempted in over 1,000 years, an alliance between dragons and elves to fight this threat. But we cannot do it alone. The entity has grown too strong, fed too well on human suffering. We need human innovation, human determination, and yes, human hope to have any chance of success. Before Elena could respond, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. In the distance, what remained of the Amazon began to smoke and burn, not with ordinary fire, but with flames that seemed to consume light itself. The Void Harvester was making its displeasure known. It's too late for lengthy explanations, Silviana said, urgency creeping into her voice. The entity is accelerating its timeline. We must reach the convergence point before it can consolidate its power further. Dr. Vasquez, I'm going to open a portal to transport us to England, to a place where the barriers between worlds are thin enough for dragons and elves to meet safely. The journey will be unusual. Elena found herself nodding before her conscious mind had fully processed the request. Something about the elf's manner, combined with the evidence of her own instruments and the growing wrongness she could feel in the very air around them, convinced her that whatever was happening was real and urgent. Just tell me what I need to do, she said. Silviana smiled, the first genuine warmth Elena had seen from her. Hold tight to your scientific instruments and your skepticism, Dr. Vasquez. You're going to need both where we're going. The portal that opened around them was like stepping into a kaleidoscope made of starlight and possibility. Elena felt her consciousness stretched across dimensions, experiencing a brief moment of existing in multiple realities simultaneously. She saw Earth as it truly was, a glowing node of life connected to hundreds of other worlds by streams of pure energy. She saw the magical realm of Ethermore, cities of crystal and song floating in skies painted with aurora light. And she saw the darkness beneath it all, a writhing mass of hunger and hate that was steadily devouring the connections between worlds. Then they were standing in an ancient oak grove in England, where trees older than recorded history swayed in a breeze that carried whispers of magic. The portal snapped shut behind them with a sound like distant thunder, leaving Elena gasping as her consciousness snapped back to a single reality. "The readings," she whispered, staring at her instruments. "The energy here is off the charts. It's like standing at ground zero of a cosmic event." "You're not far wrong," a voice rumbled from overhead. Elena looked up to see something that made her previous encounter with an elf seem almost mundane by comparison. A dragon, magnificent and terrible, descended through the canopy of ancient oaks with impossible grace for something so massive. His scales seemed to absorb and reflect light in patterns that hurt to look at directly, and his eyes held depths of knowledge that made Elena feel like a child glimpsing the ocean for the first time. "Dr. Elena Vasquez," Pyraxis said, his voice like controlled thunder. "I am Pyraxis the Eternal. Your courage in coming here may well save more lives than your species has ever produced." Elena found her voice, though it came out smaller than she intended. "Your existence rewrites everything we thought we knew about the world. As does yours, young scientist. Humans have accomplished in mere centuries what took dragons and elves millennia to achieve. You have reshaped your entire world through will and innovation. That same capability, properly directed, may be the key to stopping the Void Harvester." Silviana moved to stand between the dragon and the human, her role as translator and diplomat clear. "Pyraxis, Dr. Vasquez has been tracking the entity's feeding patterns through scientific observation. Her data may help us locate the primary feeding sites." Elena pulled out a tablet computer, its screen flickering with interference from the magical energies surrounding them. "I've been mapping unusual energy signatures at sites of environmental collapse worldwide. The pattern suggests a central source, probably underground, with feeding tendrils extending to areas of maximum life destruction." Pyraxis leaned his massive head down to examine the human device, his breath warming the air around them with the scent of deep earth and ancient fire. "Fascinating. Your instruments detect the harvester's influence as energy distortion. Can they track the source? In theory, yes. But I'd need to get closer to the source, and from what you're telling me about this entity, that might not be survivable." "Not for a human alone," the dragon agreed, "but dragons are creatures of the deep earth, and elves can weave protections that turn aside even cosmic forces. Together we might be able to shield you long enough to gather the data we need." Silviana was studying her own magical implements, crystalline devices that resonated with harmonics that seemed to bypass the ear and speak directly to the soul. "There's something else to consider. The harvester isn't just feeding randomly. It's preparing for something specific. The pattern of its feeding suggests it's gathering power for a massive working of some kind. The Great Devouring," Pyraxis said grimly, "the final act in the harvester's feeding cycle. It will attempt to tear open permanent rifts between dimensions, allowing it to feed on multiple worlds simultaneously. Once that process begins, stopping it becomes exponentially more difficult." Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the English weather. "How long do we have? Hours? Perhaps less?" "The entity is no longer trying to conceal its presence. That means it believes it's close to achieving its goal." As if to emphasize his words, the ancient oaks around them began to groan and sway, though there was no wind. The very air seemed to thicken with malevolent presence, and Elena's instruments registered a massive spike in the energy readings she'd been tracking. "It knows we're here," Silviana said, her hand moving to her starlight pendant. The crystal blazed with silver fire, creating a protective barrier around the three of them, just as the grove erupted in chaos. The attack came not as physical force, but as pure despair given form. Shadows poured between the trees, carrying with them the psychic residue of every extinct species, every destroyed forest, every poisoned river. The Void Harvester was showing them exactly what it had accomplished, forcing them to experience the death agonies of a dying world. Elena fell to her knees as the weight of accumulated environmental destruction crashed into her consciousness. She felt the last breath of the final white rhino, the silence where billions of songbirds had once filled the air, the empty spaces where coral reefs had painted the ocean floors in living color. It was too much for any human mind to bear, but she was no longer alone in her humanity. Pyraxis wrapped his dragon fire around her thoughts, burning away the despair with the fierce joy of a creature that had witnessed the birth and death of stars. Silviana wove elven song through her consciousness, reminding her of the beauty that still existed, the hope that could yet flourish, the possibility of renewal that lived in every seed waiting for spring. "The harvester feeds on despair," Pyraxis explained, his mental voice cutting through the psychic assault. "But it cannot understand hope, cannot digest determination. These are uniquely living traits, and they are anathema to its nature." Elena found her footing, both physical and mental. The scientific part of her mind was already analyzing what had just happened, cataloging the way the entity had attacked and the methods her companions had used to defend against it. It's not just feeding on death, she realized. It's feeding on the emotional resonance of death. The grief, the loss, the despair that accompanies ecological collapse. That's why environmental destruction is so attractive to it. Humans don't just cause death, we feel it intensely. But humans also feel hope intensely, Silviana added, understanding where Elena's thoughts were leading. And love, and determination to protect what they care about. Those emotions are just as powerful, but they strengthen life instead of destroying it. Then that's our weapon, Elena said, her voice growing stronger. We don't just stop the feeding. We turn the emotional resonance around. Instead of despair at destruction, we create hope for restoration. Instead of grief for what's lost, we generate determination to save what remains. Pyraxis's laughter was like landslides rumbling with ancient mirth. I told you humans were innovative. Very well, young scientist. How do we weaponize hope? Elena was already pulling up data on her tablet, cross-referencing the harvesters' feeding sites with human population centers. We need to get to the source, but not just to study it. We need to create a resonance cascade, a feedback loop of positive emotional energy that will disrupt the entity's feeding patterns. But it will require precise coordination and massive amplification. The Global Climate Network, she continued, her excitement growing as the plan took shape in her mind. It's a system of monitoring stations I helped design, spread across every continent. Originally built to track climate data, but the stations are connected by quantum communication links. If we can modify the transmission protocols. You want to turn a scientific monitoring network into a weapon of hope, Silviana said wonderingly. The elegance is breathtaking. But how do we generate enough emotional resonance to affect a cosmic entity? We don't generate it, Elena replied. We tap into what already exists. There are millions of people worldwide working on environmental restoration, conservation, renewable energy. Billions more who love their planet and want to save it. That's an enormous reservoir of positive emotional energy. We just need to give them a focus, a way to direct that energy toward a common goal. The shadows between the trees were growing thicker, and the ancient oaks were beginning to wither as the void harvester pressed its attack. Time was running out, but Elena could see the path forward with crystalline clarity. We need to split up, she said. Silviana, can your people access the Global Climate Network and begin the modifications we'll need? Pyraxis, I'll need you to help me reach the entity's primary feeding site. From my data, it appears to be located somewhere beneath the Mariana Trench at the deepest point in Earth's oceans. The deep places have always been dragon territory, Pyraxis rumbled with satisfaction. And fighting ancient evils is what we do best. But are you certain you want to face this creature directly? Even with our protection, the risk is enormous. Elena looked around the grove, watching shadows devour trees that had stood since before her civilization began. She thought of all the extinct species, all the devastated ecosystems, all the children who would inherit a dying world unless someone acted. I'm certain, she said simply. The next hour was a blur of impossible preparation. Silviana opened communication channels with her people across dimensional barriers, coordinating the magical modifications needed to turn Elena's scientific network into something far more ambitious. Meanwhile, Elena worked frantically to reprogram the quantum communication protocols, creating a resonance pattern that could carry emotional energy alongside data. Pyraxis prepared for the journey to the ocean depths with the methodical care of a creature that had survived multiple apocalypses. Dragons were magical beings, but they were also intensely practical about matters of life and death. The protective spells he wove around Elena were both beautiful and terrifying, patterns of force that could turn aside cosmic energies, but which would also likely kill her if maintained too long. The modifications are complete, Silviana reported, her voice tight with exhaustion. The dimensional communication and magical networking had drained her severely, but her eyes still blazed with determination. The Global Climate Network is now linked to every major conservation project, environmental organization, and climate research facility on your planet. When you activate the resonance cascade, it will carry the hopes and determination of everyone working to heal your world. Elena nodded, double-checking her calculations one final time. The mathematics were staggering, involving quantum mechanics, emotional resonance theory, and magical energy patterns that shouldn't exist according to everything she'd learned in graduate school. But the numbers worked, creating a coherent pattern that might, just might, be enough to disrupt a cosmic parasite. There's one more thing, she said suddenly. When we activate this, we're going to reveal the existence of magic, of elves and dragons to the entire human population. Every person connected to the network will experience direct contact with magical energy. There's no way to hide what we're doing. Pyraxis and Silviana exchanged a look that carried the weight of millennia. Their peoples had hidden from humanity for so long that revelation seemed almost as dangerous as the entity they were fighting. Perhaps it's time, Silviana said finally. Perhaps isolation has made us all weaker. If we survive this, we'll face that challenge together. If we survive this, Pyraxis agreed. But first, we have a cosmic parasite to kill. Dr. Vasquez, are you ready? Elena took a deep breath, shouldering her pack of modified instruments and checking the protective magical items Silviana had given her. She was as ready as any human could be to face something that had devoured worlds since before her solar system formed. Let's go save the world. The flight to the Mariana Trench was unlike anything Elena could have imagined. Riding on Pyraxis's back while wrapped in protective magic, she experienced the world from a dragon's perspective. She could feel the planet's life force flowing beneath them like a vast circulatory system, carrying energy and information between every living thing. She could also feel the dark wounds where the void harvester had been feeding, gaps in the flow that ached like infected wounds. The Pacific Ocean spread beneath them like a living map, its surface deceptively peaceful while cosmic forces battled in the depths below. As they approached the deepest parts of the ocean, Elena's instruments began registering energy levels that should have been impossible. The water itself was beginning to glow with an eerie phosphorescence, and strange currents moved in patterns that defied oceanographic principles. The entity is drawing power directly from the Earth's core, Pyraxis observed, his dragon senses penetrating far deeper than human instruments. It has been boring feeding channels through the planet's molten heart, tapping into the fundamental forces that keep your world alive. Can we stop that? Elena asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Not directly, but if we can disrupt its feeding at the surface level, create enough interference in its energy collection process, we might be able to force it back into dormancy. The risk is that a wounded harvester might lash out destructively before it retreats. They descended through layers of ocean that grew progressively stranger as they approached the entity's location. Fish swam in perfect geometric patterns, their eyes glowing with unnatural light. Vast kelp forests moved in synchronized waves, despite the lack of current. The water itself began to feel thick and oily, as if it were being digested by something enormous. Finally, they reached the bottom of the Mariana Trench, where the seafloor had been carved into spiraling patterns that hurt to look at directly. At the center of the pattern, a massive fissure in the Earth's crust pulsed with dark energy, and Elena's instruments nearly overloaded from the readings they detected. There, she whispered, pointing at the fissure. That's where it's feeding from. The energy signature matches what I've been tracking worldwide, but amplified by several orders of magnitude. Pyraxis settled onto the modified seafloor with careful grace, his protective magic creating a pocket of breathable atmosphere around Elena. Can you establish your connection from here? Elena was already working, setting up the quantum communication array that would link her to the global climate network. The equipment had been modified with elven magic to function in this impossible environment, and as she activated it, she felt the sudden presence of millions of human minds, all focused on the same desperate hope. Connection established, she reported. I'm reading active links to every major environmental organization, research facility, and conservation project on the planet. The emotional resonance is incredible. I can actually feel their determination. But as she spoke, the fissure below them began to widen, and something vast stirred in its depths. The void harvester had become aware of their presence, and it was not pleased. What emerged from the crack in the earth was not a creature in any sense that human minds could grasp. It was hunger given form, entropy made manifest, a writhing mass of darkness that seemed to devour light, hope, and possibility wherever it touched. Elena's instruments shrieked warnings as reality itself began to bend around the entity's presence. Now would be an excellent time for that resonance cascade, Pyraxis said, his dragonfire blazing around them in protective spirals. Elena's fingers flew over her equipment, activating programs that would channel the concentrated hope and determination of millions of humans directly into the quantum field surrounding the harvester. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the ocean exploded with light. Every person connected to the global climate network suddenly found themselves part of something larger than themselves, their individual hopes and dreams woven together into a tapestry of pure determination. Scientists working on renewable energy felt their passion amplified 1,000-fold. Conservationists protecting endangered species experienced the love of every person who had ever marveled at a wild animal. Children planting trees felt the strength of every adult who wanted to leave them a better world. The resonance cascade hit the void harvester like a tsunami of positive energy, and the entity recoiled in what might have been pain or confusion. For something that fed on death and despair, the sudden flood of life-affirming emotion was like poison. But the harvester was ancient and cunning, and it had not survived the death of countless worlds by giving up easily. Instead of retreating, it began to change tactics, trying to corrupt the very hope that was being used against it. Elena watched in horror as her instruments detected the entity attempting to twist the emotional resonance, turning hope into desperation, determination into fanaticism. If it succeeded, the very network they were using to fight it would become a weapon for spreading despair across the entire planet. "It's adapting," she shouted over the chaos of battling cosmic forces. "We need more than just hope. We need something it can't corrupt or understand." Pyraxis roared, his dragonfire taking on new intensity. "Then give it something uniquely human, something that has never existed in any of the worlds it has consumed before." Elena's mind raced through everything she knew about human nature, looking for something that would be incomprehensible to a cosmic parasite. Then it hit her, the one thing that made humans different from every other species the harvester had encountered. "Curiosity," she breathed. Then louder, activating every amplification system at her disposal. "Scientific curiosity!" The drive to understand rather than simply to survive or conquer. She reprogrammed the resonance cascade on the fly, reaching out through the network to every scientist, every researcher, every person who had ever looked at the universe and wondered how it worked. Instead of just hope and determination, she channeled pure intellectual curiosity, the uniquely human drive to explore and understand even the most dangerous phenomena. The effect on the Void Harvester was immediate and devastating. The entity, which had spent eons consuming worlds driven by survival instincts, found itself faced with minds that wanted to study it, to understand it, to learn from it even as they fought it. The Harvester had no defense against beings who could look at cosmic horror and think, "I wonder how that works." Elena felt the moment when thousands of human scientists around the world suddenly became aware of the entity's existence, and instead of fleeing in terror, began trying to analyze it. Biologists wondered about its life cycle. Physicists speculated about its energy manipulation capabilities. Astronomers began calculating where it might have originated. The harvester found itself being dissected by millions of curious minds, and for the first time in its existence, it experienced something like confusion. "It's working," Elena reported, watching her readings stabilize as the entity's feeding patterns became disrupted. "The curiosity is acting like a virus in its consciousness. It can't process beings that respond to existential threat with intellectual interest." But their victory was short-lived. The harvester, unable to corrupt or understand human curiosity, decided to simply destroy its source. The entity began drawing power from the Earth's core at an unprecedented rate, preparing to incinerate the entire planet rather than lose its feeding ground. "Elena," Pyraxis said urgently, "whatever you're going to do it now. The planet has minutes at most." Elena looked at her instruments one final time, then at the ancient dragon whose fire had protected her, then at the readings showing millions of humans united in hope and curiosity and determination to save their world. She made a decision that no amount of scientific training had prepared her for. "Silviana," she called across dimensional barriers through the quantum network, "I need you to do something that's probably impossible. Can you create a stable portal large enough for the harvester itself?" There was a moment of stunned silence before the elf's reply came back. "Elena, what are you planning?" "I'm planning to give it what it wants," Elena said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was proposing. "The harvester feeds on death and entropy, right? It's drawn to endings, to the final moments of civilizations and worlds. So let's give it the biggest ending in the universe." She began reprogramming the quantum network one last time, this time creating a resonance pattern that would make the harvester an offer it couldn't refuse, a direct path to the heat death of the universe itself, to the final entropy that awaited all things. But it would have to leave Earth's dimension to reach it. "You're trying to trick a cosmic entity into voluntary exile," Pyraxis said, understanding dawning in his ancient mind. "It's brilliant. It's also completely insane." "The best plans usually are," Elena replied, watching as Silviana's portal began to form in the water above them. The dimensional rift was massive, larger than anything the elves had ever attempted, and she could feel Silviana's life force pouring into it. "The harvester thinks in terms of geological time, cosmic cycles. It won't be able to resist the lure of ultimate entropy, even if it means giving up its current feeding ground. The Void Harvester paused in its preparation to incinerate the Earth, its attention caught by the portal's promise of universal ending. Through the rift, it could sense the far future, when all stars had burned out and entropy had claimed everything. The ultimate meal, the final feeding that would satisfy its hunger forever. With a sound like reality tearing, the entity abandoned its attack on Earth and surged toward the portal. But Elena had one final surprise waiting. As the Harvester passed through the dimensional rift, she activated a program that sent every bit of human curiosity, hope, and determination along with it. "If you're going to the end of the universe," she called after the departing entity, "take a little bit of humanity with you. Maybe you'll learn something." The portal snapped shut, taking the Void Harvester with it. Across the Earth, the unnatural darkness began to lift. Dead forests showed the first signs of new growth. Poisoned rivers ran clearer. The planet's life force, no longer being drained away, began to flow freely once more. Elena collapsed onto Pyraxis' back, exhausted but triumphant. Around them, the ocean was returning to its natural patterns, and her instruments showed energy readings that were finally, blessedly normal. "Is it over?" she asked. "For now," Pyraxis replied. "Though I suspect the universe just became a much more interesting place for a certain cosmic entity. Imagine spending eternity at the heat death of everything but with human curiosity as a companion. It might actually learn to appreciate existence rather than simply consuming it." As they rose toward the surface, Elena activated the Global Climate Network one final time, this time simply to share the joy of victory with every human who had participated in the battle. Across the world, millions of people felt a moment of perfect connection, of shared accomplishment, of hope fulfilled. The revelation of magic's existence, of elves and dragons and cosmic threats, would reshape human civilization in ways no one could predict. But for now, Elena was content to watch the sun break through clouds that were, for the first time in decades, completely natural. The Earth was healing, and humanity had learned that they were not alone in the universe. More importantly, they had learned that when faced with impossible odds, the best response was not despair or hatred, but curiosity, hope, and the determination to understand and protect what they loved. As Pyraxis carried her toward shore, Elena began planning her next research project. After all, there was an entire universe of magic to explore, and she was, first and foremost, a scientist. The ancient dragon's laughter rumbled like distant thunder, carrying promises of adventures yet to come.